Hello, everyone. Happy Holi. We are welcoming a new pillow to this space. Radhe Radhe. Here is a great book by American Jack Kerouac, Dharma Bums. We wash the dishes in the gurgling creek. So he walks around America and talks about Buddhism, and it's kind of like an agori lifestyle, if you ask me, because he's eating everything that people offer him. And yeah, that is a fun way to learn about America and those great decades before us when segregation just ended. Now we will move on to Bodong Chole Namgyal's biography from this book written by Hildegard Diemberger and other Tibetan supporters. I will link the books online, purchase details if you are interested, and welcome to my booktube channel if you don't celebrate Holi, which was this full moon. Yeah, this is a vajrapani pendant given to me by a friend, and I think vajrapani is pretty cool. Great practices. Okay. When Bodong Chole Namgyal was 5 years old, as his mind had already been awakened by the experiences of innumerable former lives, he was attracted by the practice of concentration, samadhi, without allowing the mind to be distracted by anything. He viewed family life as a prison and was not attracted by it. Instead, he preferred to seek isolation in remote places of retreat. Once his father and mother were greatly worried because they had looked for him everywhere and could not find him. Eventually, he was discovered in the yard of a big ruined house, sitting in the posture of Buddha Vairochana in deep concentration, totally heedless of the strong summer rain. Once, when he had been watching an archery competition together with many other children, at the end of which each child returned to his own parents, his father and mother could not find him. His father searched everywhere and found him in a field where the archery competition had taken place, sitting in meditation. His father was quite upset and, taking him home, scolded him because he had to look for him so often. During his play with other children, he would rest in meditation posture, motionless as a mountain. Evil minded children, thinking that he was asleep, used to make fun of him by throwing water on him or putting him in the snow to wake him up. Yet he was not disturbed by this. Sounds like holy, like the pitch. They call it pichaka, the pistols for the water for holy. On another occasion, one summer night when it was raining heavily, he disappeared yet again. All the members of his family went to look for him and found him completely naked, meditating in the middle of a plain. He looked like a lotus flower on the water. His father got very angry at this sight, seized him, and asked him where he had put his clothing. He pointed to some bushes in the distance. When his father went there, he saw that the clothes were covering the bushes. As soon as he lifted them, he realized that sheltering underneath, there were many small animals which had been threatened by the heavy rain. His father started to become worried about his whole behavior, which was so different from that of the other children, and he feared that he might become ill and become dumb. So he decided to take him to meet a good lama of the Draknag monastery in Surcho. The lama prophesied that these were not the effects of illness, but instead the signs of good meditation. The parents were overjoyed. Remembering his peculiar behavior in the past, great faith in their child was born in them. When he was 7, he realized how living beings were oppressed by suffering, and he would burst into tears in an ocean of compassion. Even when people were killing lice by gathering them and smashing them with a stone, his eyes would fill with tears. He used to buy back the lice in exchange for butter and molasses, and would then offer them his own blood by letting them live on his body. It is said that for this reason, some lay people used to call him the lice breeder. This shows that he was a treasure of kindness and compassion. The same year, he went to Samtenling Monastery in Gyam to learn reading and writing. This was a place where many scholars used to assemble. On one occasion, when he pretended to be learning to read and write, he spontaneously entered into deep samadhi. The teacher, thinking that he had fallen asleep, tried to rouse him with an iron stick, but without success. When of his own accord he spontaneously concluded his meditation, he recounted that he had seen a big ah appearing on his forehead. Innumerable words had emanated from this letter. They had covered the sky and dissolved into the syllable Om. This vision was a prophecy that in the future he would open many doors to the holy doctrine. Religious ordination. Feeling an aversion for family life and worldly affairs, he took religious ordination. When he was 7, he realized that leading a life with family and relatives was like being put in chains. So he decided to take the vow of individual liberation, since this was the precious path indicated by the Buddha of the 3 ages, past, present, future, the foundation of all knowledge, the first door to the precious doctrine. He went therefore to Samtenling in Gyam and met his first teacher, his uncle, the great Pandita Drakpa Gyaltsen. From him, he received the name of Sangye Gyaltsen, Buddha's banner of victory. Then he and his uncle were invited to Shekhar by the patron of the doctrine, Situ Choki Rinchen. The latter was very illuminated and expert in his judgments as they were related to civil and religious law. When he saw the boy, he immediately liked and praised him and requested, "Boy, would you like to meditate a short while?" The boy immediately concentrated deeply, and despite the thin clothing he was wearing, was not affected by the freezing winter. The study of sutra. When he went to Bodong Chole Monastery, which was one of the great religious centers of the land of snow, Choki Dorje mastered many branches of knowledge and became his teacher. At first, he started to learn epistemology, pramana. He considered the Pramana Vartika commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, one of the 7 treatises by Dharmakirti, to be the basis of study on this subject. He therefore studied the treatise and the relevant commentaries by Pang Lotsaba and Drakpa Gyaltsen very thoroughly. Subsequently, he visited the monastery of Sakya to study there and took debates in epistemology. Sakya was the most important monastic community in the land of snow. There gathered many scholars and those who had achieved spiritual realization. It was from there that the precious Kun lineage stemmed. This is Sakya Kun. Chole Namgyal was delighted to give speeches to the ocean of scholars at this monastery. During this period of study, he used to reflect on worldly life. Even the god Brahma and Indra, here's Indra, Brahma and Indra are prisoners of life, of this fearful worldly life. Though living conditions might appear perfect, one can hardly believe in them. The very signs of happiness are the root of suffering. Feeling sad at this, he would burst into tears. Looking at worldly manifestations, everything gives reason to feel disheartened. There is nothing the mind confides in. For those foolish people without support, I feel compassion. And so compassion was aroused in him, not just for a few specific people, but all living beings, as living beings are affected by 3 kinds of sin and suffering: large, medium, and small. He used to pray accordingly for 7 days without interruption. At such times, his eyes would be full of tears, his voice would wail, and his mind would be full of deep compassion. He never sought anything for himself. His actions showed nothing but compassion for others. Even enemies who tried to kill him were treated as mothers treating her child. To benefit all living beings, he entered the flames of suffering as a goose dives into the lotus lake. Such compassion is at the very root of the whole Mahayana doctrine. At that time, and with no apparent effort, Chole Namgyal began to excel at writing poetry. He wrote poems in praise of Shakyamuni and of Manjushri, as well as biographical apology of Shonu Norsal. He wrote dictating the verses with their beautiful words and deep meaning without need for correction. These compositions were sheer nectar to the scholars. At the age of 16, he was able to memorize words immediately without any effort. Lama Samrin, who knew that he was able to learn a whole volume by heart in a single morning, made a wager with someone that the young scholar could memorize the Abhidharma Kosha in one morning. Starting at dawn, he managed to learn it by heart just before lunch, and therefore Samrin won his wager. Likewise, in a morning, he was able to learn the great commentary of the Prajna Paramita, consisting in 15 folios, each one as long as an arrow. In one day, he read the text of Abhidharma Samuchaya 3 times, and he could read the whole text and keep it in his mind. When he repeated the text he had learned, his exposition was as clear and skillful as that of someone who had studied the volumes for long periods of time. Later, he used to say that he could study in 3 ways. He could learn by heart, he could learn by having a deep understanding of the meaning, or he could learn jointly by heart and by having a perfect understanding of the meaning. At that time, he resided in a small monastery in the perimeter walls to the northeast of the Bodong monastery. Remaining in seclusion, he meditated following the method of the goddess Saraswati. After completing one period of meditation in the evening, he would go to sleep. Soon afterwards, he would be blessed by this goddess and awakened by the sound of religious music instruments, which were louder and more melodious than that of a guitar. From then on, he often had visions of goddess and received many prophecies concerning numerous doctrines. Even children knew that he was blessed by her. He wrote a poem in praise of Saraswati in Tibetan Yangchenma and signed it as Yangchen Gaba since he considered himself blessed and inspired by her. Later, whilst residing in the house of Pang Lotava, he dedicated himself to study numerous profound doctrines. He thought of the Madhyamaka as the middle way, distant from both the extremes of the doctrine. He decided, therefore, to start a study of this subject and relevant works composed by Nagarjuna and his disciples. At first, he spent 8 days reading the first and second pages of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. Then it took him only 15 days to understand the whole book. Also, he studied numerous commentaries of the Madhyamaka composed by the disciples of Nagarjuna, such as Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti of the Madhyamaka Prasangika tradition, as well as works by Bhavya and Jnanagarbha and their followers belonging to the Madhyamaka Svatantrika tradition. The completion of his study took him slightly more than 40 days. During his youth, whenever emptiness was mentioned, shunyata, a great joy and faith would surge up within him. He considered the works by Chandrakirti particularly precious in his study of Madhyamaka, thus he developed a strong faith in this great Indian scholar. His next task was to study the numerous treatises, including commentaries by Indian scholars such as Shakyanaga Dharmottara. He understood very clearly which were the more correct philosophical positions and which the less. After this experience, he could understand more doctrinal texts merely at a glance. He realized that he could understand the doctrines as easily as if they were a children's game, and so he requested his abbot Dragpa Gyaltsen to let him go to Uzang to take participation in debates. Being quite skeptical because he had never seen him study, the abbot asked, "On which subject would you like to debate?" Bodong Chole Namgyal replied, "I want to debate on 13 basic treatises of the doctrine." The abbot was very surprised and said, "Which 13 treatises? If you want to debate on Prajnaparamita and Madhyamaka, you have to read the commentaries I composed. If you want to debate on Abhidharma and Pramana, you have to read the commentaries by Pang Lotsawa." Very respectfully, he answered, "I do not like to follow the echo of other people. It is meaningless to repeat commentaries by Tibetan authors. I have studied the roots of the doctrine very thoroughly." The abbot commented, "Such big words have never been heard in Tibet. I will test you." Then he took the 13 treatises and tested him on difficult passages. The youth answered all the questions correctly and in great detail. He could, in fact, explain clearly and correctly everything concerning the theory of the great Indian scholars with different views on the salient points of the doctrine, and lots of texts that had not been translated into Tibetan, as well as texts by Tibetan scholars. The abbot and the youth remained in seclusion for 7 days while discussing all these points. After this test, the wisdom of the youth shone as bright as the light of the sun, illuminated the darkness of doubt within the abbot. The abbot was very pleased with the knowledge possessed by the youth and praised him. "My nephew, the young Pandita, has mastered the whole knowledge. He represents the virtue of Tibet. He likes the Indian scholars such as Vasubandhu and Chandra Gomin, and he has acquired great knowledge without the help of teachers." He thought to himself, "Would it not be desirable that many scholars could listen to his teachings?" and immediately allowed him to take part in the debates at the great teaching colleges in Uzzang. Before leaving, Bodong Chole Namgyal went into retreat for 3 months in one monastery and 7 months in another in order to study the treatises thoroughly. At the age of 23, along with other 25 gifted students, they all left for Uzzang from the Bodong monastery. On the way, he chatted with some scholars and wrote a poem called "Expectation, the Vehicle of Mind," in literal Tibetan. Scholars traveling with him reproached him. "Somebody who wants to take part in the debates has to study very hard day and night. How is it that you intend to debate on 13 volumes of the doctrine, and yet we have never seen you study for even one morning? Please do not behave this way." He answered, "Do not worry, I can do everything very easily." To start with, he visited the important teaching college Kshetra of Chetang. Rumors had already spread that a descendant of Pang Lotsawa, who had mastered meditation at birth, was gifted with great compassion and had possessed a deep knowledge of the doctrine from his youth, was due to arrive. On the second day, he was invited to sit on the throne, whilst he was surrounded by thousands of scholars. Totally lacking any fear or shyness, and intrepid as a lion, he gave a speech, his voice resounding everywhere. He went on to explain the 13 volumes on which he had planned to debate. He spent one day explaining the entire Pramana Vartika. Some of the scholars listened and commented, "It is very difficult to explain this subject. This is the best presentation the monastery has ever had." And with that, I conclude, and thank you guys very much for listening. Hope you guys have a good weekend. Just delicious.